Hello, my fellow Tolkien enthusiasts. Ever since the first publication of J.R.R. Tolkien's enormously popular work, The Lord of the Rings, in the early 1950s, without any doubt, the most popular question among readers and scholars alike has been, who's Tom Bombadil? Who's Goldberry? And what the heck is going on here? They seem out of place. They seem frivolous. Fun and entertaining, but weird. So strange are they that Peter Jackson, in the making of his very well done and very popular movies on The Lord of the Rings, armed with his army of Tolkien experts, left Tom and Goldberry completely out of the movies because they didn't know who he was either. Tom and Goldberry are the transmigrated spirits of the Trees of Light, Telperion and Laurelin. Tolkien's whole mythology is about them and their destiny. Well, I know what you're thinking. But Paul, the trees, they died. Morgoth struck them to the core with his black spear, and Ungoliant, the hideous spider creature that came in from the void, put her beak to the wound and went from tree to tree and sucked the sap from them, and then her venom entered into them and they died. Well, Yavanna, who had sang them into being in the first place, chanted them into being with the power of her song. She had asked Fëanor to give her the Silmarils that Fëanor had made that contained within them the light of the trees. That with the Silmarils, Fëanor might unlock them, and with that light, she might revive the trees and therefore confute the evils of Morgoth and foil his evil plan. Well, Fëanor refused. Not that it would have done any good materially if he had actually accepted and offered them to her, because his father, Finwë, had already been killed by Morgoth, and the Silmarils had already been stolen, but they didn't know that. So the trees had died. But as Yavanna told Fëanor, she might revive them with the light of the Silmarils before their roots died. You see, the trees had died, but the roots hadn't died. So Fëanor takes a blasphemous oath with his sons, and they rebel, and with a large portion of the Noldor, they go back, and that whole story go back to Middle-earth. And in the meantime, the Valar had held council in the Ring of Doom, and they devised a plan. So Yavanna chanted and put forth all her power, and Nina washed them clean, the trees washed them clean of the filth of Morgoth and Ungoliant, in an effort to try to bring them back to life, but to no avail. Just when all hope was lost, everything was lost, they put forth one silver flower and one golden fruit. And then they died utterly, as Tolkien tells us. Well, Manwë took the silver flower and the golden fruit, and he hallowed them, which is an offering to Ilúvatar, making them holy. And then Aule, the maker, with his people, made vessels for the silver flower and the golden fruit, which became the sun and the moon. But what happened to the spirits that were contained in that last silver flower and that last golden fruit? They didn't go into those vessels. They were like crystal clear caskets. The spirits weren't there. The spirits didn't leave Arda. No, they were allowed to transmigrate into new bodies by Ilúvatar. Where did these new bodies come from? Well, Aule made them, just as he had made the seven fathers of the dwarfs, eons before. See, Aule had already made the seven fathers of the dwarves in secret, looking for pupils, looking for someone he could teach and instruct in craft, which was his nature. but they were just an extension of his will because he didn't have the flame imperishable any more than Morgoth had it. So his dwarf creatures that he had just made could only do things as far as he willed them to do it. They were an extension of his will, not real living creatures. And as he was instructing them, Iluvatar spoke, said, "Why have you done such a thing beyond your capacity?" And it's a beautiful comeback from Aule. And then he offered them to Iluvatar, which is a hallowing. He offered them to Iluvatar. And unbeknownst to Aule, in that instant, Iluvatar had accepted them and gave them the flame imperishable, and they became living creatures. And Aule said, "But might I rather smash the product of my presumption?" He says something like that. And he goes to smite them with his hammer. And the dwarves go, "Oh!" And they were living. They wouldn't have flinched if they weren't living. So Aule had already made dwarves, and with Iluvatar and the flame imperishable, they'd become real, holy, living beings, separate from his will. So Aule knew perfectly well how to make bodies, and he made the first body for Tom. Tom was eldest, and it was easy for Aule to make the first body of Tom Bombadil. It was simply making another dwarf body. And that's why Tom Bombadil resembles a dwarf. But you see, at the time he made the dwarves, he had no experience with the children, men and elves. He'd only had a vague memory from the original Song of the Ainur that he had his part in. But now, when it came time to make bodies for the spirits of Telperion and Lorien, he had great experience. He had great experience with the Noldor and the Vanyar, and at least a portion of the Teleri, all the elves that Ulmo had transported from Middle-earth to the Undying Lands after they had first awoken. So he had spent ages, all through the time of the chaining of Melkor, and for ages he had great experience with the elves. He had instructed the Noldor, and the Noldor had great love for Aule. So Aule knew the elves. So when it came time to make Goldberry's body, Aule made a body in the image of an elf princess. And that's why Goldberry looks like an elf princess. And her spirit from Lorien went into the body of Goldberry. Tom would have gotten to Middle-earth any way he chose, and he had to go to Middle-earth because he had died. He couldn't stay in the land of the Undying. And same with Goldberry, she had to go to Middle-earth too. Tom would have gotten to Middle-earth any way he chose. That'll come up later. Goldberry had to be transported there. Tom went there first. And then later, Goldberry was transported to Middle-earth, most likely by this Lord of the Waters, Ulmo. He had, as I said, he had already transported the elves, all hundreds, maybe thousands of elves he had transported already. So this is nothing unprecedented. He just merely transported Goldberry back to Middle-earth and up the Withywindle. He knew where Tom was. Up the Withywindle, deposited her in the reeds at the riverbank where Tom found her, and her heart was beating. And that's why he calls her River Daughter. So these are indeed Telperion and Lorien. It's a good girl. What about their names? Where'd those come from? Well, it's a well-known fact that Tom Bombadil was named after a child's toy of one of his children. I suppose probably Christopher, from what I remember. So that was already a given. He had already entered in and out of Tolkien's work and other stories. So that was easy. But Goldberry's name is much more interesting, and much more of a interesting clue. More than a clue, and in your face. After all, Goldberry is just a different version of what she actually was. Golden fruit. She was from the golden fruit, the last golden fruit of Lorien. The fruit was a berry, Goldberry. You see, J.R.R. Tolkien loves words. He loves words and he loves names because, after all, he was the world's leading philologist, the science of languages. So he loves wordplay. And he loves to hide things in plain view. He's really good at it. And he's really good at wordplay. And he loved words that sounded very, very similar, if not the same. And he would use them in ways that were just beautiful clues and insights that if you're not paying attention to, you'll miss. But if you are, it brings on a whole nother level of fascination and fun, like a gigantic crossword puzzle with his work, as we'll see later. It's good. Yes. So now, knowing who Tom Bombadil and Goldberry are, finally, after 70 years of curiosity and search, I offer you an experience, very interesting experience. I offer you the opportunity to go find your Lord of the Rings book and go to the Fellowship of the Ring and open it up to the chapter of the Old Forest. Follow the hobbits through the Old Forest into their encounter with Old Willow Man. And when they first encounter Tom and realize that this is Telperion. This is the silver tree. This is the origin of the opening hour. This is the origin of the silver dawn, the beginning of every new day before the darkening of Valinor. Go and experience as they follow Tom to his house. And as they approach his house, what's the first thing they see? Is a yellow beam of light, a golden beam of light that comes out to greet them. And who's there when they open the door? Goldberry, the spirit of the golden tree. And then notice how everything fits into place. Their strange interaction with each other and the limited time that they spend with each other even resembles their mingling when they were trees. And notice the white candles and the yellow candles and the white bread and white cream and yellow butter and all the references to white and yellow. And then sit with the four hobbits, particularly in the second time that they sit with Tom. This is during Goldberry's wash day. Now, it's Goldberry's wash day, it's raining. And as we all know, what drives the weather is the sun. So this is Goldberry's rain from the sun. She still has a connection with her last golden fruit, just as Tom still has a connection with the silver flower and the moon. And Tom is master, and we'll find out why later. Sit with Tom as the hobbits listen to his story, his amazing story. He seems to know everything. He says he's eldest, and indeed he is eldest. He was there long before the fathers of the elves, long before the dwarves, long before everything but the Valar themselves, because after all, he was Telperion. And sit with him as he tells him the story and goes back and back and back and further and further and further until finally so far back, he appears to fall asleep. He goes silent. And the day disappears and the stars are shining bright through the window of the house, and the hobbits are afraid, profoundly afraid. Not a fear as if they were, oh my God, there's a black rider. No, their lives weren't in danger, but they were profoundly in awe. They were afraid. This was a new experience totally outside of anything they'd ever known. And they sat there with the profound silence, with the stars shining bright, and realized that those stars are from the light of Telperion. These are from Tom Bombadil himself, these stars. These stars were made from his silver light by Varda. These new stars were set in the heavens as a warning to Morgoth, and they actually brought the elves forth. They were critical in the awakening of the elves in Middle-earth when they first came into Arda. That's why the elves love Telperion. They love the stars. The experience is wonderful and rich and deep when you understand who Tom and Goldberry are. So these are who Tom and Goldberry are in the mythology and where they came from. But they're not who they are in the philosophical text, the philosophical context of the story. We'll get into that at some other time. You see, Tolkien's work has been misinterpreted from the beginning. It's been in the wrong context. And that's due largely in part to Tolkien himself. Tolkien deceived everyone. He pointed them to the wrong path right from the beginning. And everyone went on the wrong path. And everyone's been looking and trying to understand Tolkien's work for 70 years now and can't figure out what it really is about because they haven't got the right picture. You see, Tolkien crafted a magnificently complex and beautiful puzzle. And then he put it in a box with the wrong picture on the cover. And he had everyone looking at the wrong picture and trying to hammer and glue and scissors and trying with all their academic brilliance, trying to put the pieces together, thinking that this is the picture because it's on the box. Tolkien says, look there. It's the wrong box. It's the wrong picture. Tolkien had to do that. He had to do that to protect his work. After all, the enemies of what he was really getting at would have suppressed and destroyed his work right off the bat. It would have never gone as far, certainly as it has. Certainly would have never been the subject matter of a trilogy, multi-billion-dollar movie project. It certainly wouldn't be the subject matter of an Amazon TV show if they knew what it was really about. So Tolkien hid it. He put it in the wrong box, and he sent it floating through the decades of time, leaving it in God's hands, in God's time, to be revealed at the right time, to encounter the forces that he intended it to counter. At a time when it would be thoroughly saturated into our culture. No escaping it. No escaping it. It's in every root and corner. It's in references in our music. It's in references in our visual art. It's the subject of great works of entertainment, movies and TV shows. And there's nothing more popular than the Tolkien mythology. And now it's time that it's revealed for what it really is. It's I think, the ultimate literary Trojan horse. But it's not Odysseus in the horse. And it's not giant Ajax, and it's not Agamemnon or any of the other heroes of Homer coming out with swords to defeat the Trojan guards and open the gates for the Greek armies. No, it's not that kind of a Trojan horse. But it is a type of a Trojan horse. And now it's entered into our culture. It's entered into our hearts. And it's entered into our minds. Like a time-release antidote to a deadly venom from a nasty, evil spider creature that bit us a long time ago, and its poison's been working its way through our body for a long time. And now the antidote has worked its way through our body for a long, long time, laying dormant until a proper fever is achieved, proper temperature, maybe 103 degrees, and then all of a sudden it's activated and comes into its own agency and starts to fight back at the venom. That's Tolkien's mythology, is the antidote. My name is Paul List, and I've spent the last 25 years reading, intensely reading, all the important works of literature, all the important works of philosophy, going back to 500 BC. I've read all the things that I'm pretty sure Tolkien would have read, Tolkien would be aware of. And in the last 15 years or so, when it finally dawned on me, about 15 years ago, exactly what Tolkien was getting at, I decided to put all this reading to work as I continued to read and study. And I decided to figure out exactly what Tolkien was getting at. I've always been a lifelong Tolkien fan. I remember first my mom and dad reading it to us when we lived in Underhill, Vermont, and we didn't have a TV. We weren't well off, but we were rich in love and we were rich in culture. We all played stringed instruments, and my mom and dad made sure that we were cultivated. I loved Tolkien. I loved the mythology. I loved everything about it. I could sense its goodness. I could sense that there was something there that was far beyond just the words in the page. So I put my mind to understanding his mythology, and I have not been disappointed in the least. It just continues to flower like a beautiful, beautiful, infinite wellspring of beauty and depth and goodness. And I wrote a book. It's called The Beacons of Gondor and the West's Return to Sanity. It was signed with a well-established old American publishing company, and they had planned on publishing and releasing the book in the spring of 2022 to perhaps takes advantage of some of the enthusiasm that would probably and likely be generated by Amazon's upcoming TV series. That's fine. And then a couple of months ago, I delivered my most recent draft. And a couple of months later, the editor emailed me and my co-author, who's helped me put it together. She was concerned that our work had become too complex, too academic for their readership, and they would have difficulty selling it to their audience. So rather than make it shorter or make it simpler or dumb it down or make it less than it should be, I decided to buy the publishing rights back from the publishing company, which I did. I got my letter of release from the publishing company just the day before yesterday. Now I'm free to do with my work, my book, what I will. Hopefully I'll self-publish or find another publisher with a little better, more in my liking and more in vein with the academic and complexity. This publisher didn't necessarily serve the Tolkien community. The Tolkien community is generally more capable. They love complexity. So hopefully I'll be able to self-publish, maybe with a little enthusiasm from these videos. It was my original intention to have the book published and then do some companion type videos as a companion compendium or addendum to something to augment and enhance the reading experience down the road when I had more time, perhaps. But that's changed. So I've decided to go ahead and start to make the videos and start to get my interpretation out there, because it's been out now for a couple of years in various forms and to different people, and it's been out long enough where somebody can claim my work. It's happened before to me. So I wanted to get it out now and not later. So I hope you'll subscribe to my brand new YouTube channel, The Beacons of Gondor. I hope you'll think about contributing. Maybe if I start a Patreon page, you can join that. And I hope that when the opportunity arises, which will be soon, you'll pre-order a book. The more pre-orders that we have, the more control and the more opportunity we'll have to choose our route in its publication. We'll have more control over the end product. My co-author is Ali Ghaffari. Ali is I mentored him when he was young. He's a former F-18 fighter pilot, and he is a former professor at the Naval Academy. Sounds like he's very old, but he's only in his early 40s. Ali, with his great capacity for getting things done and his great intellect, has been very generous in his time. He's a very busy man with a beautiful family. He started his own private school, so he's very, very busy. But he's given of himself to help make the book a reality. So he's the co-author. So I hope you'll pre-order the book. And what I'll do is I will expose everything of what Tolkien actually did. Nothing unimportant, nothing insignificant will be left out. From the very beginning, the true path we'll start on. What Tolkien was really getting at. What Arda and Middle-earth really are. How the Silmarils were made. Who are the children? Who are all the races? Who are the wizards? What are the dwarves? What are the children? Who are the Ents? How are the Silmarils made? How were the rings made? What was the One Ring? Why was it different than all the others that were made? Who is Sauron? Who is Saruman? All these things are answered in my book.